Hi, good evening. My name is Mike Pryor, and thank you, Doug, for introducing me. Doug said that if I fail this program tonight, he'll do a dance for us, so he may have to do that. So thank you very much indeed, Doug, for introducing me. The purpose of the program tonight is to discuss the aspect of Jewish refugees from Arab lands, and many of you won't have any idea about this subject because I didn't just until a few months ago. And when I began to read about it, I was quite surprised at the extent and the seriousness of the problem. So I was really encouraged when somebody asked me if I would contact an expert on this subject, Lynn Julius, and Lynn tonight is with us. So welcome, Lynn, to Live at 9 on Revelation TV.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for inviting me.
I know you're going to be a great help to us tonight and give us the information that we need regarding the Jewish refugees from Arab countries. And I know our viewers will be really interested in this subject because many are supportive of Jewish communities around the world and Israel. And I think for our viewers, I think it would be a good idea to get a pen and a piece of paper because Lynn is going to give us some information that will help us to support some of these communities. So get your pens and your paper ready as I ask Lynn the first question, and that is, who are the Jewish refugees from Arab lands?
Well, Jews have always lived in the Middle East and North Africa. In fact, they have been there a lot longer than the Arabs. Some communities have been around since biblical times, Iraq, for instance, or Yemen. And after 1948, which is when Israel was created, almost 1 million Jews, I think the exact figure is 850,000 Jews, were forced to leave their homes and they became refugees. And this issue has long been neglected, unfortunately. We only hear one side of the story. We hear about Palestinian refugees. But the 1948 war actually created two sets of refugees, Jewish refugees and Arab refugees.
And I was interested to see that there are more Jewish refugees than Arab refugees. Why is that?
Well, there were more of them. There were 856,000, as I said. If you include refugees from Iran, that brings the total to more than 1 million. There were perhaps 700,000 Palestinian refugees. The figures do vary. Not all the Palestinians actually left Palestine. Some were internally displaced within Palestine. But the Jewish refugees, in fact, have been almost totally wiped out from their communities in the Arab world. And a lot of these communities are on the verge of extinction. For instance, Iraq has only 6 Jews left. We've got 30 very elderly ladies living in Egypt. There are perhaps 30 in Syria, 50 in Lebanon, none in Algeria, none in Libya. There are still a few thousand in Morocco and Tunisia, but perhaps 1% of what the community once was.
Now, these refugees were created after 1948, after the War of Independence. But how long had those communities been living in those Arab lands?
Well, as I say, some of them have been there since biblical times. You probably know the verse from the Bible, by the rivers of Babylon, which is what the exiles from Jerusalem sang as they sat by the banks of the Tigris. They remembered Zion. And these were, in fact, the Jews of Babylon who had been in Babylon for 2,500 years until they were forced to leave in the last 50 years.
And what brought about this situation where they were forced out of their homes?
Well, the causes actually predate the creation of Israel. You had rising Arab nationalism, you had Islamic fundamentalism, and you had a sort of totalitarianism that excluded minority communities from Arab states. So it sort of built up through the 30s, and it came to a head with the creation of Israel. There was a terrific backlash against Jews living in Arab countries, and they were accused of being spies. They were, you know, the term Jew and Zionist were more or less interchangeable at that time. People were arrested for basically having Hebrew books or photographs, incriminating evidence. There were hangings. There were people were interned just for being Jews, and life became intolerable for these communities, and they started to leave.
So they were dreadfully persecuted in the lands that they'd lived in for nearly 3,000 years.
Yes, that is true. I mean, the persecution did vary. Sometimes the ruler did protect the Jewish community, as in Morocco and Bahrain, I can think of. But the people were incited against the Jews to such an extent that there were violent pogroms. In Morocco, for instance, some 48 Jews were killed in disturbances in 1948, even though Morocco was not then independent. So the Jews were more or less powerless in the face of this sort of popular hostility.
Right. Now, you're the co-founder of Harif, which is an organisation that perhaps you could tell me rather than me tell you what it is.
Well, it's a UK-based association of Jews from the Middle East and North Africa, and our aim is to organise lectures and film shows and generally promote the history and culture of Jews from this region, bearing in mind that soon there won't be any Jews from the Arab world. You know, they are really, this is the last generation, and their children will no longer have any connection, or very little connection, with the countries that their parents came from.
So your organisation is there to raise awareness?
Yes, that is correct.
Right. And I think that's what we want to do tonight, is to raise awareness of the situation regarding these refugees, and to help our viewers to understand the deeper question of Jewish refugees, and to be able to act on that. And that's what we're trying to do here tonight, isn't it, Lynn? Really,
yes,
to
absolutely.
Do that. Just for the viewers, if you want to text or SMS, you've got the number on the screen. You can do that, and if you want to ask any questions at all, please do, because it's a new subject to me, and it's a new subject to many of you, and we want to learn from Lynn as much as we can. So please use the text and the SMS and the facilities that we can give you to ask Lynn the questions that I know that she can answer. Now, Lynn, we talked about these, who are these Jewish refugees, but how did they actually become refugees in their countries like Iran and Iraq and Yemen?
Yeah, well, as I said, they were forced out in many cases by persecution, in some cases expulsion, and they found life intolerable. So you've got this situation where there are practically no Jews left. And they did become refugees because they had no choice but to leave, and they left all their property behind, and they were never given compensation for that property. 600,000 ended up in Israel, where they were housed in tent camps mostly, or little wooden huts, and some of these camps stayed in existence for years, and gradually became permanent towns. But these people arrived with absolutely nothing but the shirts on their back.